Hello everyone, welcome to Learn Photoshop. My name is Felix Bliss. In our previous video, we have been able to discuss the move tool, the selection tool, but with the selection tool, we're not able to finish. So we discussed the rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, single row marquee tool, and the single column marquee tool. Today we shall look at another set of selection tools in Photoshop. So these tools is another selection tools we are going to talk about: the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool. All these three selection tools perform different functions altogether, but shop, you can use them interchangeably. Okay, so without much ado, let's start with lasso. With the lasso tool, it's also known as the free hand. The lasso tool is also known as freehand tool because it allows you to make freehand selection. When we look at our previous selection, we make a definite selection, but with this one you can just create a freehand selection. Okay, so you just click any point, then you select the subject. Just make your selection around the subject you want to. So I can just select this one, then I can just um delete it. That's okay. Or better still, I can just make freehand selection around this particular drawing here. Then I can choose to fill it with color of this white, then it is done. Or if I don't want to fill it with color, I can just make selection around this image, then I'll go to delete and fill selection, which is a new function in Photoshop. So this is what Photoshop has deleted the drawing over there and fill it with the background color. So that is one particular function about the freehand tool. I had already explained these functions in our previous videos, the options tools over there. So if you don't know any of them, please make sure you check our previous video so that you understand the function of each of them. Okay. Another role of the freehand tool is that let's assume I have this particular image, okay, and by the help of Photoshop I was able to select my subject by going to select, then select subject, and I was able to do this. But assuming after the selection, Photoshop was not able to identify the edges, okay, here, or Photoshop was not able to differentiate the color differences between this skin and this area, you can make sure you subtract this particular selection so that it will do that, and we can only do this with the help of the lasso tool. So with the help of the lasso tool, you just go to subtract from selection, and let's zoom in to see the area. Okay, so I'll zoom in like this. Okay, then I will just make a selection around the edges like this. Then I will just make a freehand selection here, and I'm able to subtract that particular edge. Okay, so that my selection will be perfect now. Okay, so let's zoom out. So that is one function of the freehand tool. Freehand tool, apart from helping you to make corrections or changes to your selection, you can also use the freehand tool to remove background. Let's assume we don't have the select options there, and if you want to maybe remove background of this particular image, you can use the freehand tool, okay, to make selection around this particular image, remove the background of this particular image. I'll just use the lasso tool, but it's going to take time. That is why the select subject is there. But if you're using the old version, and I mean the CSS type, you just have to use the lasso tool or the pen tool. Okay, but I prefer using the lasso tool, so I'll just go by this and make selection around these edges. Okay, just make selection around these edges, and it's not going to be perfect, but it will be okay. Okay, you just make selection around this. I'll just select this part, then I'll press on backspace to delete that area like this, and you see I've been able to remove the background here. So that is another function of the freehand tool. Now let us look at another important selection tool here, which is also known as polygonal lasso tool. The polygonal lasso tool can also perform almost all the function I have explained to you about the freehand tool or the lasso tool. But with the polygonal lasso tool, it deals most often with straight edges. Okay, it deals more with straight edges. You can see this is a very straight edge here. I can use the freehand tool, but it's not going to be perfect compared to the polygonal lasso tool. So with the polygonal lasso tool checked, I'll just click point here. Okay, just click and then just move. Photoshop will automatically take the edge of your shape and then click here. You can also use here. I'm just making selection around this box, the edges here. I have a nice selection, and it is even faster than using uh the freehand tool. Okay, so with the freehand tool you can't get this straight selection here, but with the polygonal lasso tool you can get this straight edge here, and we can just fill this one with black. Okay, like this. Let me create a new layer above it because this is a smart object and I can't fill it, so I have to create a new layer. Then I'll fill it with black here. So look at this. Let us select it. Let us zoom out, and you see I have done a perfect selection and I'm able to change the color within simple steps. Okay, so that is one way out there. Now let us look at the magnetic lasso tool. Okay, so all these are lasso tools, just that this is just specifically for straight edges. This one too is a lasso tool. Now let us look at the magnetic lasso tool. This tool is also another powerful tool like the lasso tool. Okay, but with this tool it is able to detect the edges. For instance, if you look at this image very well, see we have these edges here. I was able to use the lasso tool to remove the background here. Same way I can use the magnetic tool here to detect the edges. Okay, so I'll just click here, then I'll just go. So you can see Photoshop is able to detect the edges of the image. Okay, and if you think it is not making a perfect selection, you just make sure you place the mouse on the edge, then click. Okay, to create a point, you place your mouse at the edge, then you click, and it will make that selection for you. And after making every selection, you just need to close it at where you start. The point you start, you just bring this cursor there to close it like that. Then press on backspace and you will be able to remove the background as well. Okay, so that is one way of the magnetic tool. Now under the magnetic lasso tool, we have some functions here. Already explained this one, that I'm going to talk about the width and then the frequency. Okay, in this particular tutorials. Okay, now let us look at this particular leaves over here. If you look at this leaf very well and see this particular magnetic tool can detect the edges as well, but with the width is telling us the distance at which we can move the magnetic tool from. Okay, if the width, let me give you example. Let's go for the brush tool and then create a new layer. Then I'm going to just make a point here. Okay, just making a rough point here. Then let me zoom in. So I will just click here and it will be able to detect. If I look at the width is 10 and look at the selection I'm going to make. Okay, I'm just making the selection. Photoshop will detect that. I can just go, if I see that it is edge, I'll click to make a point. I don't click, Photoshop will automatically make a point for me. Okay. Now let us go away from the leaf around this time and see if Photoshop will be able to. You see, it is not making the point at the edge of the leaf. So that is the width. So what we need to do here is that we need to change the width size, okay, to something like maybe 80 or 90. At that point, let's press on backspace, okay, and cancel the whole thing. You see, at this point at 10, Photoshop is not able to detect that we have our edge here. So it will create a point at this area. If you want to remove this point, you just press on backspace, 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 and it will delete all the points that was made. So let us go back and then change this width to 90. Now look at something here. I'll create a point here and then go. Photoshop will detect the edges for me. Now let's go to this distance and see if Photoshop will be able to detect the edges. And you can see this of the leaf, you get it. But when it was at 10, the edges, this is what I was talking about. Okay. So if you move away from the edges, Photoshop will detect the edges and then will create a point for you. Okay. That is when you increase the width. Okay. Now the last one I'll talk about is the frequency. The frequency is the number of points Photoshop create for you automatically. As I was moving this one, now this frequency is at 11. Okay. If I move this one, Photoshop will just automatically create a point for me. Look at this. Okay. Photoshop is just creating a point for me, but the distance between each point are too wide. Okay. So if I need a lot of points, what I will do is I'll just change this one to a high value. It can go up to 100, so I can just change it to 90, and I'll look at what is going to happen here. If Photoshop is just creating a lot of points there for me, a lot of points. Okay. If I don't need all these points, I can just press on delete or backspace, okay, to remove those points. Okay. But it is necessary you keep those points there so that you can modify them later on if you make mistakes. Okay. So this is what Photoshop is doing. It's going to do this for me. If it doesn't create the point, you just look at this area. Photoshop is not going to create the point, so I have to click here to create the point, click to create a point, and the rest I'll click here, and the rest Photoshop will just detect the edges. I just have to go like that. Okay, and I'll close it here, and now let's zoom out and see what has happened. This is a perfect selection, although we can use the select subject to do that, but with the help of magnetic tool we can also do the same thing. And I'll just come to this. Let's delete this one. Now I can just create a mask for this one, and you see I've removed the background. Perfect one. So that is another way to remove a background in Photoshop. We have about 20 minutes you can remove background in Photoshop. So that is all about this set of selection tools. If this video was helpful, please make sure you click on the subscribe button, hit on the notification so that you don't miss our coming videos. And I would like to hear from you what you think about this. I will see you in my coming tutorials. My name is Felix Bliss. I love you all. Bye bye.